Okay, so in this section, we'll be deep diving into button designing. We'll be not just creating simple buttons, but we'll be also creating buttons which will be basically having transition effect. Now let us see like this, zoom button, which we can say, it is basically scaling. This hover button, then this button, then we'll be also creating this button. Now we'll be creating this button, which is basically, the shadow is basically increasing. Then we'll be learning how to create this, pressing button. Then we'll be finally learning our, end thing, which is basically having this animation buttons like this. Okay, so by end of this section, you'll be able to create all of these buttons. So let us hop back. What I will be doing, I will be basically minimizing this. Now let us create a new file, name it as index.html. And then we have to save it also. So we can say index.html. Okay, now let us generate the boilerplate using the exclamation mark, press enter. Okay, now let us also create a new styles file. So we can say, come over here and say styles.css. Let us link our style sheet. So we can come after this and we can simply say link, and then we can simply say styles.css, save this file. Okay, now let us host this file. Let us go live. Okay, now we are having this, right? Now let us place this, over here, place our CSS file, or we can say, this over here, and we can bring this and place it over here. So let us drag this down properly. Perfect. So we are having all of our things aligned perfectly. Now let us start coding. Now the first thing which we'll be basically doing is that we'll be creating that subscribe button. For this, what we'll be doing, we'll be coming over here, and then we can simply say button. And then we can assign a class to this button, something like class equals subscribe. Now we can provide a text, okay, over here. Like we can say something like subscribe, something like that. Okay, now let us write the CSS for this. Now what is happening over here? So this button is basically an opening tag, which is having an attribute, class, which basically uniquely identify this button. Now we are having the text, which will be basically shown on this button between this opening and closing tag of this button. And here is our closing tag of this button. Okay. Now let us come over here. Firstly, save this. Now we'll be able to see this button. Now let us style this button. So what we'll be doing, we'll be coming over here and we can simply say button. And in this button, we can, do a few of the things. Like we can simply say something like font family. Let us make the font family to be something like Arial. Now the next thing which we can do is define the font size. So this font size, we can increase it to maybe 20 pixels. Let us refresh. Now we can, give it a padding. Now we can give a padding of 10 pixels to top and bottom. And for left and right, we can give it 20 pixels. Now the next thing which we can do is we can provide a margin. Let us provide a margin of something like 50 pixels. Okay, now the next thing which we can do, we can basically specify the height, and we can say the height to be something like 3 m units. Okay, now we can also specify the width. Let us do the width to be something like, we can say 8 m units. Okay, now we can do a few more things. Like we can say the border to be as none, so there will be no border. And few more things like, we can specify something like border radius to make it rounder. We can say border radius to be 5 pixels, something like that. So we can increase it to maybe 15 pixels. Okay, now it is looking cool. Now we can make the cursor to be pointer. And we can say pointer. Perfect. Now what we can do, we can also specify a few more things like, give it a background color and all of that. So we can come over here and we can say something like background color, and we can say red. Save it. Now it is having a background color. We can give a color to this text by simply saying color, and we can say white. So the text color will be white. Let us refresh. Now we can do a few more things like, we can say that, let us suppose we want this, we can also increase this font size to maybe something like 2 m units to make it more bigger. Perfect. We can make it 1 m unit for a second. Okay, we can increase it to maybe 1.5 m units. Perfect. Okay, now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is that will be updating few of the things. Like, we can say something like letter spacing. Let us give it a letter spacing of maybe 2 pixels. Okay, now we can give few more things like, let us say a font weight of maybe 700. Let us say, okay, now we can give it a opacity of maybe 0.9, something like that. Okay, so it is a little bit lighter. Now there can be few more things, like we can give the text transformation to be something like uppercase, or we can even make it something like, capitalize. So we can say capitalize. Yeah, it is looking much better. Now, let us do few things, okay? Now, what we'll be doing that whenever this button will be active, okay? So we are basically using the active Sudo class. We can simply say active. Now, what active refers to over here? So whenever this button will be in a clicked state, we can update few of the things, like, we can update the box shadow. So we can have a box shadow, and we can, say box shadow to be 0, 0, 10 pixels. And we can say RGBA, and we can say something like 255. Let us make it 0. And let us make it 0 also. Okay. And let us make the alpha value to be something like 1. If we save, and if we click on this, now see there is a red, shadow in the background when we are clicking on this button, right? But we can also do few more things, like we can scale this button by simply saying transform, and we can say scale, and let us scale it to maybe 1.1. Let us save this, and now if we click, this button is expanding, right? It is basically scaling. Now we can make the opacity to be 1 to make it look more better. So you can say 1. And now if we click on this, it is looking much better, right? So what we can do, few more things, is that we can basically add a transition. So let us add a transition. We can come over here and we can say transition. We can say transition on all the elements. And then we can simply say that we want the time duration to be up to 0.2 seconds. And the time function, we can give it ease. And then we can say that we want the delay to be of 0 second. Okay, now let us see what is happening. Now, if we are clicking on this, the animation is looking much cleaner, because, it is taking 0.2 second, right? So to expand this button, right? So if we refresh again, we'll be finding out this button. Now we can also increase this time to maybe 1 second to see how cool it is looking, right? So it is taking much, like if I click on this, then it is taking 1 second to, show all the effects, right? Now we are all having this ease. We have ease in also. So there are different timing functions like ease and out. Now if we click on this button, see? So there are different timing function, and it is completely upon you how you want to use it. However, now you can also specify a certain section. Like we can say that we want this for only something like, we can say we want this to apply only on box shadow. Then we can do that. And let us say we make the box shadow to be 1 second. And if we click, the scaling will be immediate, but the shadow will, take a little bit more time, right? And similarly, we can mention the other ones also. So we can copy this one, and we can have a comma, and let us come over here. We can specify that, let us suppose I want the scale, which was, okay, so I want the opacity, something like that. So I want the opacity to take something like 0.1 second, while I can say that I want, I can have a comma, and then I can say something like, I want this transform to take something like 0.5 second. I can do that too. So I can say transform, and I can say something like 0.5 second. And if I save, now click on this button. So it is, looking like that. But, if we increase this, this timing, then it will make this website more slower, right? So now the animations are much slower. So it is preferable that you keep the timing, in a certain, in a certain time, so that it is responsive and faster at the same time. So what we'll be doing, we'll be making it something like 0.1 second, because the clicking, it only takes, like 0.1 to 0.2 seconds. That's it. We can make this all 0.1. And now if we come over here, it is much faster, right? Now let us move on and let us create our next button. And the next button was basically a hover shadow button. So let us do that. can come back. Now, if we come over here, we can find out that all of these buttons, a few of these properties which are common, like this one, like this pointer, border radius, border width, height, margin padding, font size, font family. What we can do is we can, specify this to maybe only that specific, to all the buttons. However, the remaining things will be, making it specific to this subscribe button. Okay. So let us come over here, cut all of this. Like we can come over here, cut all of this. Okay. Now we'll be doing one simple thing. We'll be coming over here and we can say subscribe. And over here in the subscribe, we'll be pasting this. Let us save this and it is still behaving the same way. Now this transformation, or we can say this active, it will be also, specific to this subscribe button. You can say subscribe, save this, come back, and it is still working fine, right? Now let us create another button. Now this button will be basically used for the hover shadow. So we can simply say button. Let us give it a class by having a dot. So we can say something like hover. We can say shadow, come down. Now over here, we can, give a text something like hover over me, something like that. Save it. Now we are having this button. Now see, because we have already specified, this button, the styles. So it will apply the styles on all of this button and we can update these things by using the class, right? Using the class selector. So we can come over here and then we can simply say hover shadow, which was the class name which we have provided over here. Now we can see that the width is not sufficient to fill this text. So we can increase the width of this, right? So we can simply say width and let us make it something like 12 units. Let us save. Now it is filling it correctly, right? Now let us, apply a few of the things. So what we can do is we can come over here and then we can basically specify few of the things like, let us give it a background color. So we can say background color. If we give it a background color of white, save it. Now what we can do is we can do few more things, like we can give the text a color of something like cyan. Okay, perfect. Now what we'll be doing, we'll be basically having a text transform. So it is, we can make the text transform to be capitalized. Save it. Now, this property can also be applied directly over here. So we are not needed to write it again and again. So let us cut it from here, apply it over here. So this is basically applied to all the buttons. And now we can remove it from here, right? Okay, perfect. So it is still the same, right? Now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is that we'll be basically, giving a transition effect to this. Before that, let us also discuss the remaining things. So we'll be basically giving a hover effect to this. So we can simply say hover shadow and we can say hover. Now hover is also a pseudo class which basically triggers the shadow, we can say hover effect, right? So we can simply say box shadow. Let us give it a shadow of like 15 pixels. And then we can say cyan, save it. And if we come over here, see, it is looking cooler, right? Now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is that we'll be giving a color to this text of something like black, save it. Okay, so the color is also changing of this text. Now we can do a few more things like, we can say border to be of none. Okay, so by default, the border is none, so we are not required to do this. Okay, so it is done. Now the next thing which we'll be basically doing, let us also, apply the active pseudo class. So we can simply come over here. We can say hover shadow and we can say active. And when it will be active, what we'll be doing will be basically saying box shadow. And let us, increase the box shadows. So we can say 15 pixels. We can say cyan. And let us also have another layer of 25 pixels. And then we can say 30 pixels. Let us increase it to 30 pixels and let us say cyan. Save it. Now, if we hover on this, but if we click on this, it will be much brighter, right? Because there is a layer. Now, how is this working? So we are having our first layer and this layer is basically having a spread shadow of 15 pixels. So it will be having that. And over that layer, we are having another layer, which is basically 30 pixels. Because of that, this 15 pixel will basically have a double layer, right? During this 15 pixel, because this 30 pixels will also be covering this 15 pixel with an additional 15 pixels. So the first 15 pixel, this first 15 pixel will have, a double layer, which will make the color more brighter. And after that, the color is, becoming a lightweight, right? Now we can see this if we come over here and let us make this red for a second. Save this. And if we come over here and if we click, see what is happening, right? So we are having a blue layer. If you can clearly see around this button, you'll be seeing that there is a blue layer to 15 pixel, and then there is a red layer which is spreading to 30 pixels, right? So that's what we are doing. We are basically making two layers of the same color with different, radius of this shadow, which will basically help us to make this cool effect, right? Upon clicking. Perfect. So it is done. Now, what we can do, we can also make few more things. Like we can say something like, so we can also give it a border. So we can say border, let us say something like 1 pixels. We can say solid, and we can give the cyan color to this border. It is looking much cooler. And what we'll be doing, upon clicking on this, we can remove this, right? So upon hovering on this, we can simply remove this border to be none, okay? Now what will happen? See, as soon as someone come over this border is removed and it is expanding, right? So it is basically looking much cooler. Now what we can do, we can also apply transition over here to make this effects more, we can say more smoother. So we can come over here, we can say transition. And over this transition, we'll be having this box shadow color border. So let us specify box shadow. So we can say box shadow, we'll be saying takes 0.1 second. We can say take the ease, ease timing function. And then we can simply say the delay will be of 0 seconds, right? Then we have this color. So let us specify for the color also. We can say 0.1 second. Then we can say ease. Then we can say delay will be of 0 seconds. Then we are having this border. So let us do the same thing for border. We can say border. We can say 0.2 second for this. And then, or we can say 0.1 second only. And then we can say ease 0 second for the delay. And is there anything else which we were having? None. Okay, so this is enough. We can remove this comma. Let us come back. And now it is much smoother. Let us click on this. Okay, perfect. So we were able to create these two buttons. And from now, the next buttons which we are going to create will basically teach you more things. Like it will make you understand more about transition. We'll be also looking how to use different other things. So let us create the remaining buttons. For this, what we can do, we can come over here. And after this, we can simply have our remaining buttons. Now the first button, we can simply say something like button, and then we can give it a class of maybe, like button 1, and then we can say button 1. So to make it more simpler, right? Something like that. Save it. We are having this button over here. Now let us focus on this. Okay, now come back over here. And now what we will be doing will be simply selecting this class, which was button 1. And then we can basically give it a background of something like none. So there will be no background. The background is completely removed. Now the next thing which we'll be doing will be specifying the text color to be, okay, so the text color is by default black, so we'll be not doing that. We can give it a box shadow. The box shadow will be of 0, 0, and we can say the spread will be of, or, we can also make it 4 pixels, and the spread can be something like 10 pixels, okay? And then we can simply say RGBA. We'll be having 0, 0, 0, 0.15. Let us save this. Okay, now we are having this box shadow over here. Okay, now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is that we'll be making its position to be relative. Now we haven't discussed the positions now, but let me tell you what is happening over here. So a relative position is basically, so this button is placed over here, right? Now we will be moving this button. Now this movement, which we'll be doing, we have to basically, take a point from where we'll be basically moving. So relative basically refer that we want to move from this point, okay, where the current button is. So we'll be, taking the center point of this button, and then we can move it right, left, anywhere, okay? So let us do a few more things. Like we will be basically saying that we want the overflow to be hidden. So we can say overflow to be hidden. Perfect. Let us save this. Okay. Now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is that we'll be applying a hover effect. So we can come over here, and then we can simply say dot button 1, and we can say something like hover, and then we can simply make the color to be of white. So the text color will become white. Yeah, it is becoming white. Perfect. Now what we'll be doing, we can come down, and now we'll be invoking another Sudo class, which is basically before. Okay, now we'll be simply saying button 1, and then we can simply say before. Okay, come down. Now, what is before? Before Sudo class, it has basically been used whenever, we want to do few of the things. Now, what things we want to do? So whenever we create a button, right? So the button is first formed, and over that the text is formed, right? Now, what we are doing using before, we can basically specify the button behavior even before the text is basically being generated. Okay, so even before the text is basically being generated over the button. So it basically helps us to define few styles even before the content of an element is being generated, right? So what we can do, we can make the content to be empty. So what we'll be doing, we'll be basically saying that we want the content to be empty. Now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is that we can make this position to be absolute. Now the next thing what we'll be doing will be basically having the top to be of 0. Then we can have the left to be of 0. Then we can have the width to be of something like 0%. Then we can have a height, and we can have the height to be of 100%. And then what we'll be doing, we'll be making a background color, and we can have a background color something like hashtag 9b59, and then we can say base6. Okay, and the next thing will be that we'll be giving a transition. We can say all, we can say 0.9 second, and we can say ease. Now we'll be making the z index to be -1, because we want this item to be in the background. So we can say z index, and we can say something like -1. Now let me explain you what is happening over here. Okay, so this z index, why we basically use z index. So z index basically help us to stack item upon, like we can basically stack item on one upon another. Now this z index, let us suppose if we make the z index to be -1, then this color will basically go in the background of this text, which will be, basically being formed on this button. Okay. Now over here, if we come over here, let me explain you what is happening. So at the starting, we are basically making the width to be of 0%. Okay. So the background width will be of 0%. Now we are having this, this background color. Now what we'll be doing, we'll be basically, slowly, we'll be basically increasing this width, and we'll be bringing this width to something like 150%, which will make this color, look like it is flowing in the background. So what we'll be doing next, we can simply come over here, and we can say button 1, and we can say hover, and we can basically have this before. So what we'll be doing, if someone hovers over this, then we'll be updating the before with saying that we want the width to be now 150%. So what will be happening over here? Let me explain you very clearly. Okay, so what we have done, we have basically defined the width to be 0% before even the text is formed on this button, and then we have defined the width to be basically of 0%, and then when someone hovers over this, we are basically increasing the width to be 150% over a time period of 0.9 seconds. So what will happen? If we come over here, we can see this cool looking transition, right? So what is happening? It is basically taking 0.9 seconds to increase its width from 0 to 100%, or we can say 150%. And during this time, we are basically having the background color of this. So whenever this will basically start this, so let me also increase this time to maybe something like 3 seconds. Okay, so you'll be able to see what is happening. So what we are doing, we are basically increasing this width from 0 to 150%, and you can see this over here, like it is slowly increasing because we have increased the time to be 3 seconds, right? So that's what we are doing, and using this simple technique, you can basically achieve this button. Okay, so let me also make it again 0.5 or 0.9 second upon your preference. Okay, now it is much faster and it is looking much cooler, right? Okay, now let us create the next button. Let us come over here, and then we can simply copy this code again, and then we can have another button, and we can say this button class will be of button 2, and we can say this button will be of 2, right? Now let us come down and write the CSS part of this button. Okay, simply select this button by saying button 2. And now what we'll be basically doing, we can simply say something like we want a border to be of 1 pixel of solid, and we can have a color of something like 3498 dB. Let us save it. Okay, perfect. Now we are having that border, right? Now we can make this background to be something like none. So you can say background to be none, save it. Now we are having no background over here. Okay, now let us focus on the remaining things. So we can simply say color. Now we can use the same color for the text. Now the button text is also having the same color as of the border. Now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is that we'll be making its position to be of relative. And then what we'll be basically doing is that I will be making the overflow to be hidden. Okay, so if there is anything like the background is overflowing, like if it is going outside of this boundary, it will make it hidden. Okay, now the next thing which we will be basically doing is that we can come over here, we can say something like button 2, and then we can have the before Sudo class. And in this before Sudo class, what we'll be doing, we'll be basically saying that the content is nothing but empty. Now the next thing, we can make this position to be absolute. Now the next thing which we can basically do is like top to be of 0. And then we can say left to also be of 0. Then we can say something like width, I want it to be 0%. Height, I will, leave it for now. Then I can have a background. And I can say background to be of something like hashtag 3498 dB. Okay. Now the next thing will be, I will be giving it a transition of something like 0.8 second. And then I can simply say I want a border radius to be of 0, 0, 50%, 50%. Okay, so this will basically specify top, bottom, left, right. So we are saying that we want 0, 0 at the top and bottom, and we want 50% at left and right. Okay, I'll be wanting my Z index to be of -1 because I want it to be placed at the background. Now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is we'll be saying button. We can say 2. We can say hover. If someone is hovering on this button, then we can update the before. So we can say before. And now what I'll be doing, I'll be saying width to be something like 200%. And let us save this. If we come over here, so nothing is happening. The reason is that we have to also update few of the other things. Like we can come up and we can come over here and let us make the height also something like, 0%. Okay. And then we can also update the height to be also 200%. So we can come over here and let us say height to be 200%. Save it, come over here. Okay, now the thing is that I think so we have to also change the text color to be of white when we'll be hovering. So we can simply say button 2, and then we can simply say hover, and then we can simply say color to be of white. Let us save this. And now if we come back, we'll be able to see this. Now, what is this overflow doing over here? Let me show you, okay? So we can come over here and let us suppose if I remove this overflow and I save it again. Now see, it is expanding to 200%, okay? So it is basically expanding to 200%. And when we are having this rounded, corners, it is still showing from over here. Now this overflow, this overflow hidden will basically hide all the things which is, in the outer region of this, we can say this button, okay? So that's why we are basically using hidden. So now it will be that, okay? Okay, now you can do more awesome things using this. Like you can say you only increase the height to maybe 50%. And if you do it, now let us see what is happening. See, right? So we can do cooler things using this. Like we can do something like that, right? Something like that. Where you can try various things. Like you can, make this width to be something like 60%. Save this, right? So you can, create any animations as you want it to be. Okay. Now you can also do few more things. Like, you can say something like that. I want this top to be of 50. Save this, come over here. Now see, so this top has been, shifted down, right? Now what I can do is I can also make this left to be of something like 50. And if I do it, see, so there is a left of 50, or, we can say 5 of 50, okay? So we are seeing that there is a left position of 50, top of 50, and then we are getting this in the bottom, right? Now, let me make this 0 again. And what I can do more is that I can come over here and let us say that I say this height to be, let us say 50%, and let us save this. And if I come back and let us keep this height still 50%, which was there, right? Which was here. And then I can increase this width to be maybe 200%. And if I come back, I'll be able to see this transition, right? Now, similarly, you can create more, like you can make this height to be 100% and create this height to be 100% again. Save this, come over here. Now see how it is looking. So what I can do also is that I can see that we can increase this height to maybe 150% and keep this height to be 150% also. And now if we come back, see, we are having the same effect which we created earlier, right? Now you can have different flows, like you can say something like, okay, I want this height to be something like as, so I am having this height, right? So what I can do is I am updating this width, right? I am updating this width and I am increasing it. Now let me do one thing. Let me have this width to be constant. Okay, so I can say 200% and I can increase this height gradually. Let us suppose I say something like 0% at the start, and then I can increase it to maybe 200%. Let us save this and now see what is happening. See, right? So now we are having the flow from, top to bottom. We can even do from bottom to top by saying that I want my height to be something like 200%, and then I will gradually decrease my height to be 0%. Let us save this and now let us see what is happening. See, right? How cool it is, right? It is like, it is, now there is something like a carpet and it is going towards the upside, right? And then we can reveal the text, right? So there are various things, like what I can do is I can come up and I can, come over here and I can say this text to be something like black. And if I do it, let us save this for a second. I have to close this tag. Okay, now if I reveal, see, so what I can do is I can make it white, then it will look much cooler. So I can make it white, and then I can come down and over here I can make this black. Right, save it. Now see how cool it is, right? So, try to play with these things and try to create something awesome, okay? So it will be basically your task. What I want you to do is try to make a flow from right to left, like we have done from left to right. Make a flow from right to left on the same button. Then again try something like a flow from bottom to top, like we have done from, so we have done from bottom to top, do one from top to bottom, okay? And try various things. Like you can try from this position to this position flow, or this position to this position flow, right? So you can try different things, and, spending time on this, this experimental things will actually make your interest, increase much more, and will make you understand these things in a much higher dimension level, right? Now let us move on to the next thing. Let us create another button over here. So you can copy this again, come down and have something like button 3. Okay, now let us create a very simple button. Come over here, select this button 3 class. We can say button 3. Now over here, what I can do is I can give it a box shadow. So it will be a box shadow. It will be a box shadow. And in this box shadow, I can say 0, 0, 5 pixels. And then I can say something like cyan, save it, come down. So we are having this, and we are having, a shadow at the background. Now what I can do is I can make this background to be of none. So I can make this background to be of none, right? Save it. Still we are able to see this, right? Now we can do a few more things, like we can say I want a transform to be of 0.2 second with ease as the timing function. Now what I'll be doing, I'll be coming over here and I can use the hover Sudo class and I can simply say button 3 hover, and upon hovering, what I'll be doing, I'll be basically, increasing or decreasing this button size. So I can simply say transform, I can say scale, let us decrease it to maybe 0.9, save it, come down. Now the button is reducing in size. One more thing I can do is I can give it a box shadow. So I can give it a box shadow and I can have another, layer of this box shadow. What I'll be doing, I'll be coming over here. So I can copy this one over here. So we can come over here. Let me come over here. And then we can paste this, have a comma, again paste this, and increase this to maybe 15 pixels. Save it, come down. Now see, there is a shadow which is increasing, as we hover on this, and basically the button is basically scaling down, right? Now let us create one more button. So we can, copy this thing again. And we can say something like button 4. It will be button 4, right? Now what I'll be doing, I can come over here. And then I can simply say button 4. And then I can simply say transform to maybe 2 seconds. And I can say ease, have a box shadow. And I can say a box shadow of 0.05 pixels. And I can say something like cyan only. And then what I will be doing is that I will be having a background to be of none again. And then what I will be doing, I will be coming down and then I can say simply button, button 4 active. So I'm basically invoking the active Sudo class, which will basically, will be active when, someone will click on this button. I can simply say transform and I can say scale it to maybe 0.9. Okay. And the next thing which I'll be doing is I'll be having the box shadow. So I can simply copy this one. Okay. And I can come back. Now we have the same effect, but for different things. Like we have this effect upon hovering. So let me save this also. So this is something which we are getting upon hovering, and this is which we are getting for clicking. Okay. So we have created this button till now, and now let us move on and create our final button. Now where we'll be basically understanding about unordered list and list items, and then we'll be basically creating this list and converting them into button icons. Okay. So let us move on with that section. Okay. Now the main thing which we'll be basically using is the unordered list. For this, we simply type UL. Now here we have created an unordered list. Now there are two types of list in HTML. One is a ordered list, while the another one is a unordered list. Now this unordered list and ordered list basically have items inside it, which we call it as list item. Now in an unordered list, this list item can be, arranged in any fashion, while in a, in an ordered list, this item basically follows a certain sequence and they will appear in that particular sequence only. Okay. Now what I'll be doing, I'll be basically creating, a list item over here, and then I can simply say enter. Now here I'll be specifying few of things, like I'll be, having an inline CSS, and I can say style. Now here in the style, I can simply say -i, and I'll be associating this I with a color of, I can say something like hashtag 2E9, or we can say 2E3192. Now then I'll be also having another one, which will basically J, and I'll be also assigning a color to it, something like hashtag 1B F. Okay, and I'll be having the semicolon. Now what I'll be doing next is that inside this list, I'll be having two things. So I'll be basically placing I can say an icon. With this, I'll be also placing a text over here. Now where I can get the icons from, for this we'll be basically visiting a website. So it will be basically ionic.io, and you have to visit this ionic.io Ionic icons uses section. Now come over here. Now below this, you'll be finding out this script tag, right? You have to basically copy this entirely, copy this one, come over to your HTML, and after this, or we can say before this style sheet, you have to basically link this, okay? So we are done with this. Save this one. Now what I'll be doing, I'll be coming back to this, Ionic icons, and I can search any icon over here. Now the icons, like we can say something like Facebook. Now I will be basically getting this. What I have to do, I have to basically copy this thing, come over here, and now after this, I can basically paste it in this list, okay? Okay, now we are having this, right? Now what I can do is, I can basically specify a class to it by simply saying, something like, so what I can do is, I can also, keep this complete Ionic, or we can say Ion icon inside a span, okay? And this will basically help us to style this, okay? So what I will be doing, I can come over here, I can simply cut it for a second, and let us have a span over here with a class name something as icon. Okay, so we can come over here and we can say span.icon, and then we can paste it inside this, okay? Okay, now we'll be requiring a name also. For this, I can use another span. So I can say span, and then inside the span, what I'll be doing, I'll be basically having a class name to it. And this class name will be something like, we can say title, okay? And then I can give a title, something like Facebook, okay? And save this. Now, what I'll be doing is, I'll be coming over here, and I can see this Facebook logo right over here with this Facebook text, right? Now, we have to create similarly the remaining list. We can copy this, come down, paste it for 5 times. Okay, now we have to arrange this properly. Perfect. So it is now done. Now what I'll be basically doing over here is that I'll be specifying the remaining logos. So we have this logo Facebook. Now I also have remaining logos. So let me do that. What I'll be doing is come over here and let me say something like, we can say cellular outline. Save this. So we'll be getting the cellular icon. With this, we have few more icons. Something like, we can say battery charging outline. Save this. Now we are having this battery one. Now we have few more. Like we have one for the Bluetooth, and there will be a E over here. Save it now. Okay, now we are getting this Bluetooth one. Now we'll be requiring one more icon, which is basically logo Amazon. Save it. Now we are having this, so it will be Amazon. Save it, and we'll be getting this Amazon icon, right? And let us also change this text to, something like Amazon. Save this. Now we are having this Amazon text. This text, we can update this to something like Bluetooth. Save this. Okay, now the next thing which we'll be doing is, we'll be changing this text to something like charging. Save this. Now this one will be basically something like poor network or good network upon you. Okay, save this. Now we are having all of this, right? Now let us style this. Okay, let us style this, each of this individual element. Before this, we have to also specify the color. So what I'll be doing, I'll be basically specifying the color. It will be D4145A. This color will be basically, we can say BB03B. Come down. This color will be basically 009245. Come over here. This color will be basically FCEE21. Come down. Now this color will be basically 02AABD, and this color will be something like, 00 CDAC, and this color will be something FF5 F6T, and this will be basically, FF, we can say C371. Okay. Now, all of these colors, I have basically gotten it through a color scheme. So I have basically, searched for color scheme and I have gotten this gradient colors, okay, accordingly. Now, save this. Okay, now before we move on with our styling part, I want to, put your attention to a place, which is the span, okay? Now, the span is widely used. And why do we basically use the span? So let us suppose we are having a paragraph. And now this paragraph is basically having two texts. Let us suppose it have hello world. Now we know how we can basically uniquely identify, this paragraph. We can, whether we can basically use, we can say a tag selector or a class selector or an ID selector. But how do we uniquely identify the items of this paragraph, like hello and world? For this, we can basically use a span. So what we do, we can simply have something like, a paragraph. And in this paragraph, we can have something like hello world, right? And now I can basically assign a span, something like that. And inside the span, I can put this hello. Now I can, give it a class of something like hello, right? Save this. Now we are having this text hello world, right? Now what I can do is I can individually even change the color of this hello while the world color will be still this. Okay, so what I can do is I can select this hello, so I am basically invoking this class. And now I can simply say something like color red, right? And save it. Now see, this hello is having red, right? So this is how we basically use span. Okay, so span can basically be used to distinguish, items of an element individually. Okay, and there are various other use, and we'll be looking into this as we'll be moving on with our video. Okay, for now what I'll be doing, I'll be basically removing this because we don't want it for now. And let us refresh. Okay, now everything is aligned perfectly. Okay, now the first thing which I will be basically selecting for styling is this UL, which is our unordered list. Now I can simply say that I want a margin of maybe 20 pixels. And after this, I can simply say I want a padding to be of something like 0. Okay. Then what I can do is I can simply say box sizing to be of border box. And then I can simply say something like I want a font family. So let us use this kill sans for now. Then what I will be doing, I will be basically having a position, and I will make this position to be relative. And then what we'll be having, we'll be basically aligning these items to in the center. Okay. And then I can also have something like justify content, which will basically help us to align this contents to center. Now I'll be using another property, which is display. Now we haven't covered the display property for now, but we'll be basically using a display flex. Now what it will do is it will basically align all of this item in a horizontal fashion, while the current, ordering is in a vertical fashion. Okay, that's it. Now the next thing is I will be having a gap. Now this gap is something which will ensure that each of this item is having a gap of 50 pixels between them, so they are not aligned together. Okay, we can save this. Now if we come down, we'll be able to see that, if we scroll this or we can increase this, we'll be able to see that they are aligned perfectly in a, we can say in a vertical fashion, right? Now let us do the remaining things. So what I can do is, for a second, I am not requiring this HTML. I can minimize this, bring this over here, and bring this over here. So I can basically bring this over, here, and I can keep my style sheet over here, right? Now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is that we'll be doing few more things. Like we'll be now selecting the li items. And now what I can do is I can make their position to be relative. Now the next thing is that I'll make this list style to be of none, which will basically help me to remove this dots, right? So after this, what I'll be doing, I'll be basically increasing the width and height. So the width I can say it to be 80 pixels, height to be something of 80 pixels also. Save this. Now the next thing which I will be basically doing is I will be making this background, to be something like of the color white. Save this. Now the next thing which I will be doing is I will be having a border radius of something like 40 pixels, which will help it to make round. Now the next thing will be that I will be making the cursor to be pointer. Okay, now what we can do is we can also make its display to be flex. Save it. Okay, now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is we'll be justifying the content to be center. And then what we can do is we can simply say align items to center. So this justify content over here, it will basically align the items in a horizontal fashion to be in the center, while this align item will basically align them in a vertical fashion to be in the center. Okay. Now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is we can have a box shadow, and we can have something like 0, 0, 25 pixels. And then we can have RGB color of something like 0, 0, 0, 0.15. Save this. Now they are perfectly having that. Now I can have a transition of maybe something as 0.5 seconds. Now save this also. Perfect. Now what I'll be doing next is that, I can focus on the hover effect. Now I can come down and I can say something like ULLI, and I can say hover. And if someone hover upon this, we can simply increase the width to be maybe 220 pixels. Save it. Now I can basically have a box shadow with here also with 0, 10 pixels. And then we can have something like 25 pixels. And then we can have RGBA. We can have 0, 0, 0, 0.15. Save this. Now if we hover on this, it is basically increasing, right? Okay, now it is perfectly increasing, and this is what we are currently wanting. Now let us move on with our next thing. Now what I'll be doing, I'll be coming over here and I'll be selecting this ULLI before. Now it is also a pseudo class, and we have already discussed about this, right? So what I'll be doing is I'll be simply saying content to be of empty, and then I can simply say position to be of absolute, and then I can simply say inset to be of 0, and then I can simply say border radius. We can have a border radius of maybe 100 pixels. And then what I'll be doing, I'll be changing the background color, or we can say background, to be something like linear gradient, and the color will be 45 degree, spread will be in 45 degree. You can simply say where I. So we'll be having then where J, and we have defined all of this, colors in our HTML, if you remember, right? So we have defined that I, J, and we are directly using them over here. So why did we did that? Okay, so we did that because if we haven't, then we have to define this unique behavior for each of this, and we have to specify this color over here for each of this. So by using that inline, we can now reuse this code. Okay, that's it. That's the main purpose why we have done that. Okay. Now the next thing will be that we make the opacity to be of 0 for now. Save it. Now the next thing will be that we have a transition of something like 0.5 seconds. Perfect. Now the next thing will be basically that we'll be having a hover for this before, and we can simply say ULLI hover, and upon hovering, we'll change the before and we'll update its opacity to something like, we can say 1. Save it. If we hover on this, see, right, it is working perfectly. Now let us move on with our next section. Now in this, what we'll be doing, we'll be basically selecting this icon. So let us select this icon. We can simply say ULLI, and then we were basically having that icon, which was ion icon class, right? Or we can say ion icon, we can say tag, and then we can basically specify the color of this to be something like where I. Okay, so it is basically a variable. Now the next thing is this font size, and let us specify the font size to be of 2M units. Now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is that we'll be having a transition of something like 0.5 seconds. And then we can basically have a transition delay. So we are saying that I want a delay in the transition. So I can do this directly over here also. So I can simply say something like, so let us do it below only. So we can simply say transition delay, and in this delay we can have a delay of maybe 0 seconds. So we don't want any delay to be happening over here, right? And if we come over here back, okay, so they are working perfectly. Now let us select this span. So we can come down and we can simply say something like ul li, and we can say span, and then we can say position to be something like absolute. Save it. Okay, now they are basically in an absolute position. That's why they are basically, having each one of them upon another one. Okay, now let us do the remaining thing. So what I'll be doing is that I can come over here and I can select this ul li, and we can say this title class. And inside this, what I'll be doing, I'll be making the color to be #FFF, which is basically white. Now we have this font size, and we can modify this font size to be 1 unit. Then we can do few more things, like we can transform the text to be capitalized. Then we can come down, have a letter spacing of maybe 0.1 units. Save it. Now after this, what I'll be doing, I'll be basically having a transform, and I can say something like scale and make it 0 for now. Okay, now the next thing which we'll be basically doing is that we'll be having a transition of 0.5 seconds, and then I can simply say transition delay of also 0 seconds. And then whenever someone will basically hover on this, I will, increase this title scale from 0 and I will make it 1. Okay, so let us do this. So I can come over here and I can say ul li hover, and upon this hovering I can have simple this title, and I can simply say transform scale to 1. Save this, and we can have a transition delay of something like, so we can say something like transition delay of 0.25 seconds. Save this. And now if we save this, okay, so we have to, have this transition delay of 0.25 seconds. Perfect. Now we can save it. Let us come down, and we are getting this, right? The only thing which we are not getting is that we have to, remove this, we can say icon upon hovering. So what we can do is, so we can come over here and we can select this. We can say ul li ion icon. We can say hover, and upon hovering, what we'll be basically doing is that we can, make this hover upon this li, right, instead of this icon. So we can simply say li, and if there is a hover upon this li, we can do a simple thing that we can transform its scale to something like 0. And with this, we'll be doing its, changing its color to something like white. And then we can simply do one more thing, like we can say transition delay of 0 seconds, right? Let us save this, and now let us check. It is perfectly working as we have seen, before starting this section, right? Now we have covered a lot of things. We have covered a lot of buttons. Now the one thing which is still remaining is that you should be practicing all of this, right? So I will be basically attaching an exercise after this section, and you should be practicing that by your own. So take help from anywhere, but try to implement that thing by yourself, okay? And after that, take some rest, because it is a long session. You have covered a lot of things. Try to recall these things, and for this you'll be requiring a little bit of rest. And after taking rest and completing the practice section, you can basically continue with the remaining sections of this series.